Hi, Chris O'Connell here to do part 2 of the Matt Kuchar swing analysis. This video was taken in Chicago at the BMW, which was the third FedEx tournament, and it would have been Matt's last tournament before his win at Turning Stone. Much of our work the first few years were to stabilize the club face and get rid of the left miss for Matt. Matt would aim left and hip thrust into the ball, which would create a club face going from open to shut, and when he didn't have it timed out correctly, he would miss left too much. Last year, about halfway through the year, he had his card locked up, and I kind of looking forward was wanting to know what he wanted to work on in the off season being last year of 08. And his reply was that it's been a while since I've outdriven somebody. Me as an instructor, the biggest insult you could say is that you got shorter by working with me. And I said, well, we can get you longer, but you're going to have to let me work on your hips, which he had been resisting for quite a while. He just couldn't feel his hips, didn't feel like he could do what I asked him to do. So we worked a lot on the way he moves his hips, both in the backswing and the downswing. Also, he spent a great deal of time with Telos, which is a fitness company that does sport-specific training in Atlanta. His hips were locked up, and he didn't have much flexibility or strength in his hips and glutes, and he spent a lot of time with them. This year, he picked up over 8 yards with his driver, which equated to 50 spots in the driving distance. He picked up 1.77 miles of clubhead speed with his driver, which was the third biggest increase on tour this year. I'm going to talk about, in addition to the training that he did, he had worked out before, but he hadn't done golf-specific training. So in addition to that, I'm going to talk about the two things that we did to get him more distance. I drew a line on the shaft plane. I drew a parallel line above it representing the shoulder plane. Drew one on the top of his head, and I drew one on his butt, and then a line on his spine angle. So as I take him back here, you're going to see that he swings underneath his plane a little bit. Doesn't bother me because he's going to get right back onto his plane here in just a second. His arm position here is in a great spot to where if I just drew some parallel lines across his forearms, biceps, and shoulders, you can see those three lines are all roughly in the same plane. His left arm's low and tight, which keeps his left shoulder down. And you can see that his head is dropped already, and his right butt has actually gone through the wall. A lot of people wouldn't think dropping your head would be a good thing to do. It's a great thing to do for a one-planer because it allows you to turn your shoulders steeply. We worked a lot in the backswing on getting Matt to get his right butt to go through the wall in the backswing, which allows his head to drop and allows his shoulders to turn much steeper than they used to turn. Matt's hips tended to work towards the ball in the backswing, which then to counterbalance that, his upper body had to stand up, because if his hips moved towards the ball and he tried to stay bent over, he'd fall out on his toes. And he actually would get a lot of weight too much in the toes in the backswing to where his right heel would be off the ground. So we worked a lot on just feeling like he was going to pull his toes up on his right foot so that he could set back into his right glute. Now, the reason that will create power is because much like a discus thrower or a speed skater, their shoulders are going to turn on a much steeper angle than their hips turn. When the shoulders and hips turn on the same plane or parallel planes, you don't create any torque, and they can just kind of keep turning. Here we're building up some torque by getting his right butt to go through the wall. It's going to allow his shoulders to turn steeper. It's going to get him more loaded up. Now, as I continue back here, you're going to see he gets right back on his original shaft plane. It just couldn't be any more perfect than that. That's why being a little bit under his plane doesn't bother me in the least. His head has dropped more, his right butt is still through the wall, and now as we get up to the top, we've got him loaded up. I always want the hips moving away from the target line. If they move towards the target line, the upper body can't stay in its posture, or you fall out over your toes. It also makes room for your arms and hands to get back down onto the inner circle. If your thighs and hips are moving towards the ball, you can't return your hands down onto that shaft plane line, and you can't return the club onto its original shaft plane line. Now, Matt's left arm at the top is very low, to the point where it even bothered Matt a little bit, the look of it himself. And when I explained it as an advantage rather than a disadvantage, all of a sudden he didn't view it as a problem. What I did is I showed him video, and I just showed him that his hands only have to come down that far to get back down onto that shaft plane, or we could also call that shaft plane the inner circle, because I'm wanting the hands to come down onto that circle. I'm not wanting the hands to come down and stay above that shaft plane. If they come down and stay above that shaft plane, now I'm on the outer circle and I can't return the shaft onto its original plane. I showed him that he only had to get his hands and arms to drop that far to get onto that shaft plane, whereas a lot of other guys, if they had their left arm, I'll draw it in green here, let's say they had their left arm in more of a traditional position there, they have to drop nearly twice as far to get back down onto that shaft plane, because their hands aren't going to be as far behind them, and because they're not as far behind them, they're going to be a little bit higher. They have to come all the way down there to reach the original shaft plane. Now, Matt and I have not worked a whole lot on his arms in the backswing. He's always naturally kind of put him there. And one of the reasons we got along early is I think I was probably the first person that told him I liked his backswing. Most of our work, particularly early on, was all downswing. This year we've worked some on the backswing, but not really with the arms. It's mainly with the body. Let me clear out some of those lines so we can see what's going on here. And now I'm going to bring him down, but you'll notice how much his head has dropped, how much he's increased his spine angle, and how much the right butt has gone back behind him. He's loaded up there, whereas before his hips were moving in front of that butt line, shoulders much flatter just so he could stay upright, not loaded up. So as we continue down here, you're going to see just how quickly he gets down onto that original shaft plane line, or the inner circle. There, he's back down on it. You can see the shaft is exactly on it. His right forearm is on it, and his hands are on it. His left butt now has started to move behind the line, which is what we have worked on a lot this year. He would, from the top of his swing, he would tend to hip thrust, where the hips would move towards the ball and it would set the swing too much inside out. So we've worked a lot on getting that left knee, thigh, and hip to move back so that he never comes in front of that blue line, which you can see he's not doing here. Lowered his spine even more. He is exactly on that shaft plane line, and you're just going to see how there's no hand action going on during the hit. Now he's a little bit down his line here, and he actually came to Dallas in between this tournament and the Turning Stone. He came here the weekend before the Turning Stone, and I wanted to get his arms to move a little bit more left. he felt like if he could get his body to move a little bit better, his arms would follow. I didn't disagree. It's chicken or the egg. So what we worked on a lot was getting the left knee back. I feel like here he's doing a good job of pulling the hip back, but he's not pulling the left knee back. And what I want to see in that left leg is a little bit more, looking a little bit more this way, whereas I feel like he's got the left hip pulled back, but not so much the knee. So we worked a lot on just getting the knee, thigh, and hip to pull back, and not just the hip. And then his arms started going more back to the inside, because he was fighting, if anything, prior to turning stone, he was fighting a little bit fat and a little bit of hooking. You can see his right foot is still flat on the ground at impact. He used to kick the right foot quite a bit and thrust his hips towards the ball. Beautiful right foot position there, which is more of a result of correct hip movement instead of footwork. It's a result, not a cause. The other thing we did to get him power, with the first one being just getting him loaded up differently in the backswing, was in the downswing. I'm going to just take him on through here. It's a little down his line with his arms, beautiful body position. You can see how the shoulders are perfectly parallel to that shoulder plane, that original shoulder plane. They're a little bit below it because his head, he has increased his spine angle. Left hip still behind the line. Take him all the way through here. He never comes off that butt line. Now some guys will come off the butt line after impact, and that's perfectly acceptable. Beautiful position there. The other thing that we had done for power was, from the top of his swing, we wanted him to turn his hips and torso as fast as he could and as far as he could, to where I wanted him to finish his hip and torso turn, or at least feel like it, finish his hip and torso turn by impact. That would force him to turn them faster, and it would force him to turn them sooner. He's reaching the same end point in his swing as he was, but what we were doing by getting him to turn his hips and torso sooner and quicker and further was we were accelerating his hips and accelerating his upper body. Whereas before he would finish at the same point, but at impact his hips and torso weren't turned as far. So he was more or less coasting through the ball. What we're trying to do is much like the TPI model, the kinematic sequence, where your hips fire, they accelerate, they slow down, they don't stop. They reach a peak and they slow down, it goes up and then down, and then here comes your upper body. It accelerates, it goes up the graph, reaches its peak and slows down. Arms do the same thing, club does the same thing. So instead of him having these peaks in his body, he was having more flat line, to where his hips were turning, they were moving, they were never accelerating and then slowing down. Upper body wasn't accelerating and slowing down. So by getting him from the top of his swing to feel like he was going to complete his body turn before impact, we were getting those peaks to happen, rather than him just finishing fully turned but never accelerating those different body parts. So that was the second thing that we used in the downswing to get him more power, and we worked a lot this year on that left knee, thigh, and hip, making sure it was moving back behind him, so that would allow room for the right hip to come up the target line and not go out into the ball. And by getting that left knee, thigh, and hip pulled back out of the way, it made room for his arms and hands, so that because the right hip wasn't thrusting out into the ball, to where the hands and arms could not get down onto that inner circle and he was stuck above that original plane line on the outer circle. So I hope that was informative, and hope you picked up something out of that to help your own game. Thanks.